When no one stepped up to help the widow's son, a maid's daughter made an inspiring sacrifice. Ethan stood at the edge of the dying cornfield, the stalks wilted and brown, limbs heavy with the despair that now surrounded him. A void where his mother used to be loomed larger with each passing day, every reminder of her smile only amplifying his sorrow. There was no one left to turn to, no one to shoulder the weight of the farm that had once flourished under her care. With every ticking moment, bills piled up like the dust that settled on the old farmhouse, reminders of a life that felt more like a cage than home. The neighbors had been cold, a stark contrast to their once vibrant camaraderie. The poor widow's son, they called him, with hushed tones that bounced back from the dry earth. It felt like a title, mocking and isolating. Ethan clenched his fists, feeling the jagged edges of loss push against his chest. A part of him still clung to the hope that help might come, though he was haunted by the fear that he would fail, not just the farm, but the memory of the only family he had left. Then there was Clara, the bright-eyed girl who lived beyond the field, the daughter of the maid who cleaned houses. They had crossed paths during school, sharing glances filled with unspoken understanding amidst the laughter of those who didn't know what it meant to struggle. Even now, the weight of her dreams to fill the world with color felt so distant from the gray clouds hanging over Ethan's life. He barely had the strength to talk to her, worried that even a single word might cause the fragile link of their acquaintance to shatter. As he sank deeper into despair, grappling with the looming threat of drought, Ethan noticed Clara's determination flicker alive. Questions nagged at him. Could she pull this off? Would the bake sale even make a difference? While he stood teetering on the brink of hope and hopelessness, Clara was too. The weight of their worlds collided, and he doubted whether a mere recipe could turn the tide. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Ethan felt a surge of vulnerability as Clara poured her heart into the bake sale. But could a few baked goods really bridge the chasm of despair swallowing him whole? Whispers reached him even during the preparation, voices hissing judgment like hungry snakes. He wanted to scream, to push against the tide of their greed and ignorance. Instead, silence gripped him, and that gnawing sensation of impending failure clawed relentlessly at him. With each step Clara took towards her goal, Ethan's mind raced, battling disbelief and longing. Would he be able to accept help from someone in a similar struggle, risking their friendship in a town where community meant judgment? Just as he began to sense the flicker of camaraderie growing between them, the shadows of division crept in, feeding his doubts. Yet there they stood, at the precipice of what the bake sale could mean, inches away from redefining their lives. Ethan could feel the weight of the choice that lay ahead. Could they challenge the misinterpretation of their circumstances, step beyond the barriers imposed by their lives, and forge a bond resilient enough to withstand the storm? Choices loomed like the gathering clouds, each one heavier than the last, demanding action, while Ethan spiraled deeper into uncertainty. Ethan stared blankly at the barren field, each wilted stalk pressing into his chest as if demanding accountability. In a world painted with hopelessness, he felt the brush of fear and denial, but also a flicker of longing, a desire not just to survive, but to reclaim purpose. Clara's determination pulsed like a heartbeat against the backdrop of his despair, awakening a buried instinct within him. Yet accepting her help was a challenge. There was a cautious yearning to be seen as more than just the widow's son, an impulse to shed the skin of pity wrapped around him like chains. He watched Clara bustle about, her smile bright amidst the wilted corn, and the way her hands moved with purpose. Each loaf she crafted, each pastry she decorated, seemed infused with life, contrasting starkly with Ethan's fraying resolve. Beneath the surface of his indecision, a question festered. What if he chose to participate? Could he shift away from the stories whispered about him in the shadows? He recalled the tale of a stranger who saved their town by cultivating a barren piece of land, not with magic, but with hard work and grit. The possibility raced some life back into his veins. If Clara could open herself up, could he not at least attempt to step beyond the paralysis that gripped him? He breathed in the sharp whispers of the wind, casting away the paralyzing doubts that lingered. The sound of Clara's laughter pricked at his stubborn heart. There was a variance, a vibration of joy dancing through her words. Did that not beckon a response from him? Inspiration was not a lone endeavor. The light she embodied could illuminate his path as well. With an impulsive decision, he approached her unsteadily, heartbeat thrumming in his ears. "Maybe I could help," he said, his voice trembling. Clara turned, her surprise morphing swiftly into a gleeful acknowledgement. They began making plans. Their possibilities stretched wide like an open horizon. By choosing to join her, Ethan sprinkled life back into their desiccated world. Each mixing bowl and adorned cupcake became a step toward empowerment. At first, Ethan struggled with the rhythm Clara had effortlessly found. A blob of dough slipped through his fingers, splattering flour across his worn jeans. Mortification fused with annoyance. He feared becoming the punchline of their shared moment. Yet the laughter that escaped them both felt strangely liberating, while also confirming his instinct. The shared experience would forge a path through judgment toward acceptance. As the bake sale drew near, an unanticipated camaraderie solidified. They strategized incessantly, driving each other towards loftier ambitions. Clara embraced his suggestions with vitality, as if he'd awakened a dormant fire. The connection deepened, each laugh and exchange dissolving the walls they had both fortified around their hearts. Yet, as the sale approached, the weight of external expectations began wrapping around Ethan once more. What if they failed? What if mockery echoed louder than laughter? Fear clawed at the back of his mind, ready to draw him back into despair. He wondered if he was setting himself up for disappointment, inviting a public introspection he was ill-prepared to face. It would require them to confront not just their neighbors' gazes, but their own vulnerability. Ethan clenched his fists as he maneuvered through this pivotal space, trying to define courage against the gnawing fear threatening to engulf him once more. What stood before him was not merely a bake sale, but the chance to reclaim his identity, to push against the decay of his life and rise into an existence filled with authenticity. The moment was poised to reveal truths he both desired and dreaded. With Clara at his side, it became evident that they were on the edge of a transformational journey, one that would demand them to face their pasts, confront their present realities, and ultimately reshape their futures. But the suffocating uncertainty loomed thicker by the minute. What was the true cost of success, and were they ready to pay the price? Ethan awoke early the next morning, a mixture of anticipation and dread swirling in his stomach. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the remnants of flour scattered across the kitchen counter from yesterday's chaotic bake session. It felt like a lingering reminder of the tumultuous path he had begun. Today was not just another day. It marked the final countdown to the bake sale, a day that would reveal the weight of their combined efforts, exposing both triumph and potential failure. He had spent the night contemplating not just the recipes but what they embodied: hope, resilience, and the stark reality of their situation. Clara's presence felt like an anchor, grounding him against the turbulent tide of self-doubt that threatened to pull him under. Yet even as determination bubbled within him, a relentless voice echoed in the recesses of his mind. What if their creations didn't sell? What if the laughter he had shared with Clara yesterday was merely a distraction from the inevitable judgment they would face? Ethan slipped into his clothes, stealing glances at his reflection as if to confront the man staring back. This was a moment meant for growth, a moment that had the potential to sculpt him into someone unrecognizable from the boy shrouded in grief. He checked the time, feeling the pulse of urgency quicken. Pushing through the door, he was met with the expansive sky, endless and inviting, yet dangerously precarious. When he reached the bakery, he found Clara already bustling about, arranging trays of cupcakes and cookies like a painter preparing a canvas. The sight reignited the flicker of resilience he had mustered the previous day. "Do you need help?" he asked, an unsteady boldness twisting in his gut. "Always," Clara replied with a bright smile that felt like sunlight itself. The exchange placed them firmly on a team, his trepidation just a shadowed corner of their shared enthusiasm. As they worked side by side, he found comfort in the rhythm they created. a dance of ideas and concoctions that breathed life into their ambitions. But as customers began rolling in, the friendly chatter and laughter around them felt almost overwhelming. Ethan caught whispers about him in the back of his mind, stories of the widow's son, a label he couldn't seem to shake. He sensed the glances aimed his way, the judgments woven into the fabric of their conversations. Slicing through the air was the tension that came with expectation. He realized that what felt light-hearted for Clara now felt suffocating for him. Still, Clara was a steady presence, never faltering in her energy. "Look at how many people showed up. This feels amazing." Her joy was infectious, even if a part of him longed for solitude in the heat of confrontation. The delicate pastries gleamed beneath the fluorescent lights. Yet in his chest, doubt roared louder than any applause. As the hours ticked by, the space between hope and reality widened. Customers trickled in, their tastes varied, and their whims fickle. Some smiled, indulging in the pastries, while others casually turned away. With each rejection, Ethan felt as if they were stripped of their efforts, leaving behind remnants of shattered dreams that clung to his heart. A moment of stillness settled as the line dwindled. Clara's gaze met his, a silent question passing between them. He could feel the weight of unspoken fears heavy in the corner of his mind. I had promised to help. But what if we failed? Fear clawed at him, a creature of doubt lurking beneath the surface, waiting to rise. Then, a voice broke through, loud and clear. "These are the best cookies I've ever had." The proclamation came from a child clutching Clara's decorated confections, germs of joy radiating outward. In that moment, Ethan felt a spark ignite, a whirlpool of emotion stirred within. Perhaps, he thought, their efforts weren't in vain after all. But the thought soon spiraled, knotting with the raw fear of risk. What did it mean to rise if it could just as easily mean to fall? His heart raced, and he realized he stood at the precipice of something greater than fear. He was ready not just to survive, but to claim the right to exist. More than the outcome of the bake sale, he craved the validation that came from embracing vulnerability head-on. Could he hold on to that flame? Could they both withstand the inevitable storms? As the air thickened with tension, Ethan braced himself for what was to come. The moment loomed ahead, and it was bound to demand a price. The cost of authenticity was rising, and he was determined to pay it willingly. But as he glanced at Clara, a familiar unease crept back once more. Would the strength of their bond survive the revelation of their true selves? And who would they become in the aftermath? The bakery hummed with activity, yet Ethan felt distanced from the cheerful chaos surrounding him. Clara's laughter erupted like the warm scent of baked goods wafting through the air, infusing the atmosphere with energy. But for Ethan, the joy seemed muted against the rising tide of anxiety. His hands busily assembled pastries, yet his mind spun with questions about his worthiness as an aspiring baker. The first hour had brought a modest influx of customers, but the echo of their conversations pierced him. "She's got the spirit of her mother," one older woman remarked, indirectly invoking Clara's lineage. To Ethan, that felt different, as if he bore the weight of his past combined with the expectations of the future pressed against him. He forced a smile while catching Clara's eyes every once in a while, lingering in the warmth of her presence, hoping she wouldn't notice the internal storm brewing just beneath his surface. "Let's do a tasting, get more people engaged," Clara suggested, pulling him back into the moment. "I'm thinking we should showcase the lemon bars next. What do you think?" Before he could frame a response, Ethan found himself agreeing, the words slipping out more easily than he expected. The thought of sharing their creations ignited excitement in him that craved expression. Together they worked to prepare a platter, arranging the lemon bars as if they were precious gems. As they set up, Ethan managed a light-hearted quip. "You sure these won't get devoured before people can even sample them?" His tone was playful, but behind it lay a persistent tug of doubt. "I'd eat them all myself, but we need to let the world taste them first," Clara laughed. Yet the underlying truth of their uncertainty hung heavy. While his laughter with Clara felt genuine, she didn't sense the fracture beneath the surface. For her, this was a celebration, a chance to shine and open their lives to others. For him, it was an exposure of vulnerabilities laid bare, doubting whether he could withstand the scrutiny of success or failure. The tasting event attracted attention, and soon small clusters of customers gathered around. Clara eagerly described each pastry, her hands animated, eyes alight with enthusiasm. Ethan stood slightly behind her, feeling like an observer to a scene unfolding, the awkwardness of being under the spotlight pulling at his confidence. He watched skeptically as one woman sampled the lemon bar and immediately nodded in delight. The small victory energized Clara, who quickly turned to Ethan with wide eyes. "See? They love it." Beneath her excitement, Ethan felt a surge of determination, but also a pinch of fear, a reminder that acceptance hinged on their baked goods and their artistry. "What if this is just a lucky break?" he murmured, struggling against the tide that threatened to pull him down. "Then we'll get lucky again," she smiled, brushing against his arm. Her optimism was like a lifeline, yet he feared what it might mean if the tide turned. As more people tasted their creations, word spread quickly. Laughter and energy grew in the bakery, but Ethan remained ensnared in his internal dialogue. Could the taste of the lemon bars really carry the weight of his self-doubt? He watched as they engaged with customers, but with each compliment that Clara received, the voice inside him grew more insistent. If they succeeded, what would that mean for him? How could he reconcile the fear of judgment with the burgeoning desire for belonging? The minutes ticked by, and the strands of their connection hung in delicate balance. Would his lingering fears overshadow the progress they made? Would he allow himself the pleasure of acknowledgement, or would he remain shackled to his past? As Clara turned to greet a new batch of customers, their excitement almost palpable, Ethan could feel his chest tighten at the thought. Perhaps he had entered a defining moment, a crossroads requiring a choice to dive into vulnerability or retreat back into safety. Decisively stepping forward, Ethan caught Clara's gaze once again. As he endeavored to answer her silent question of possibility, a deeper concern loomed. What if the vulnerability he craved came at a cost he hadn't anticipated? In that decisive moment, he faced a critical choice that could tip the balance between his past and the possibility of his growth. Would stepping into the light reveal his worth or expose his insecurities? As realization washed over him, Ethan felt a growing urgency, a need to define who he was apart from the shadows of grief. Yet, with every crumb that fell, another doubt solidified in his mind. What if stepping forward meant risking the fragile connection he and Clara were building? And as he prepared to speak, a familiar figure from the past appeared in the doorway, bringing with them an unsettling wave of memories. Ethan froze, his heart racing as his eyes locked onto the figure in the doorway. It was Callum, an old acquaintance from a time he wished to forget. The jolt of recognition was like a shockwave that threatened to unravel the fragile threads of his composure. Callum, with his slick hair and confident stride, was an unsettling reminder of competitive influences that had haunted Ethan throughout his years of training. Clara, oblivious to the turmoil brewing inside him, beamed at the newcomer. "Hey, Callum! It's been ages! Come on in!" Ethan felt an internal protest rising within him. This was not how he wanted the day to unfold. He had hoped for a moment of connection, an affirmation of progress made alongside Clara. Instead, anxiety clouded his thoughts as the specter of his past re-entered the present uninvited. Without thinking, Ethan reflexively stepped back, wishing he could blend into the background, his pulse echoing in his ears. The tasting event had lit a spark in him, but now, it flickered like a candle threatened by a sudden breeze. Callum's presence not only rekindled Ethan's insecurities, but also ignited a burning comparison that stung. They had trained together, but Callum had always had an edge. His effortless charm and polished skills, enough to garner admiration and respect. "Ethan!" Clara called, pulling him back into the moment as she waved him forward. "You remember Callum, right? He used to dominate all the baking competitions." "Sure," Ethan managed, his voice barely rising above the hum of movement around him. The words felt heavy, laden with a history that made them feel almost false. "Looks like you've got something decent here," Callum said, eyeing the lemon bars with a smirk. "Are those as good as the ones I made back when?" It was a taunt drenched in bravado, and Ethan could feel Clara's gaze shift to him, an unspoken question hanging in the air. Did he have the courage to face this? "Why don't you try one?" Ethan challenged, the tremor in his voice barely masked by an attempt at confidence. We would love your feedback. The words felt foreign and unfamiliar, leaving a metallic taste in his mouth. For a fleeting moment, he felt as though he were stepping onto a stage, prepared to confront criticism. The idea was exhilarating yet terrifying, a test that could either break him or reshape his resolve. Callum picked one up and bit into it with an exaggerated deliberation. Every second felt like an eternity as he analyzed the flavors, his expression shifting from consideration to concentration to a smirk. "Not bad, actually," he finally said, shrugging. "Not exactly groundbreaking, but they're decent." Ethan could feel heat rising to his cheeks, indignation bubbling beneath the surface. Rather than igniting anger, Callum's remark sparked something different, an intrinsic awareness of his own trajectory. The constant need for approval from Callum only emphasized the importance of challenging the voice of self-doubt. "So, how does it feel to be back in the game?" Callum queried casually, his tone laced with a thinly veiled condescension. "It feels good," Ethan replied, stealing his voice, forcing out he wasn't just an afterthought. "It's about sharing what we create with those who appreciate it. Not everything has to be groundbreaking to be worthwhile." Clara's eyes widened in surprise, and a flicker of admiration danced across her features. There it was, a flicker of the man he aspired to be, standing up for both his passion and the worth of his work. "Exactly," Clara chimed in, pride shining in her expression. "It's about the love and effort put into it." Ethan's heart swelled, a mixture of relief and determination puncturing the anxiety that had constricted him. The moment crystallized into clarity. As Callum shrugged off the moment, the urge to retreat lingered, but it wasn't as suffocating. This was a challenge, a test of character, and a step closer to asserting his place in the bakery. A place not defined by others' expectations, but by his own growing confidence. But even as conviction bubbled within him, a shadow of doubt flickered. What would Callum think when he saw the bakery's potential flourish under Clara's guidance? If success followed him back into the fold, would he become a source of envy or embolden his fears? As time stuttered, the glances exchanged between Clara and Ethan ignited a comforting silence amid the chatter, hinting at the unspoken connection they shared. Yet, with the risk of that connection came the anxiety of exposure. A reminder that validation lurked close, just at the periphery of every interaction. Ethan's heart beat fervently in his chest, caught on the precipice of self-discovery, while uncertainty loomed ahead. Could he transform this nightmarish encounter into a stepping stone for meaningful change? With a newfound determination, Ethan made his decision. This was not just a bakery, it was a sanctuary for growth, a canvas for creativity, and an arena for self-exploration. Finally, as the laughter around them faded into white noise, a familiar flutter of anxiety settled once more in his chest, and yet it felt like an invitation, one not to be feared, but rather embraced. With a deep breath, Ethan knew the time had come to confront his past, not only for himself, but also for Clara. The stakes were higher than ever. As Callum leaned back against the counter, a condescending smile still on his lips, Ethan resolved to weave his way through this moment, inside the bakery and out into the world, and maybe, just maybe, inspire himself to claim the growth he sought. But as he gestured to Clara to join him, the weight of a decision loomed terrifyingly large. Would he grasp the moment, or let it slip away like flour through his fingers? Ethan took a measured step forward, confronting the unsettled mix of dread and resolve swirling inside him. The air felt charged, electric with the tension between their ambitions. His heart raced. In that moment, he was acutely aware of the decisions that lay ahead of him, seeing them like a broad tapestry woven with threads of potential. "Clara," he said, pulling her slightly closer as he spoke, "let's share the story of what we're trying to create here." He could feel the weight of her expectation and trust in him, and it ignited a flicker of courage. "Absolutely," Clara replied, enthusiasm bubbling in her tone. The warmth of her support wrapped around him, fortifying his resolve. He turned to Callum, the competitive ghosts of his past lurking just behind. "Callum, it's not just about the accolades or the flash of a perfect dish. We believe in a story behind each item we create." The words spilled out before he could second-guess them. "We want our bakery to be a reflection of who we are, the love we infuse into everything, the journey we embrace." Callum arched an eyebrow, the casual smirk fading slightly, replaced with a hint of intrigue. So it's about the emotional impact then? Interesting? Ethan seized the opportunity. Yes. We're not just churning out pastries. Each creation is a piece of our journey. The trials, the failures, and the triumphs. I want the community to feel that. Something clicked. He could see it in Callum's eyes, a flicker of understanding mixed with skepticism. Here was the moment where he had the chance to redefine himself, not as the underdog, but as a creator with a true vision. As Callum leaned against the counter, shifting his posture from relaxed to slightly engaged, Ethan felt the familiar spark of determination rekindle within him. He glanced at Clara, who smiled encouragingly. I remember how it feels to create something that resonates, Callum finally said. His tone softened, laced with a hint of genuine curiosity. But you need the skills, Ethan. It can't solely be about the story. This was it, the confrontation he needed. I don't think art and skill are mutually exclusive, Callum. You can perfect technique while still embracing creativity. It's about finding the balance, and I'm committed to that. If I falter, I'll grow. If I succeed, it won't just be for accolades. It'll mean something. Callum's expression shifted, a mixture of surprise and contemplation hanging in the air. Bold statement. Let's see how far you can take that. Then, as if awakening a buried determination, Ethan felt something shift within him. The validation he'd sought had transformed. It was no longer about Callum's approval, but about proving to himself that he could rise above the shadows that once defined him. His gaze fixed upon Clara, who was studying him with an unreadable expression. His statement hung in the balance, buoyed by her unwavering faith. What if he channeled the pressure instead of letting it demean him? It took a moment for him to realize the magnitude of where he stood. Let's invite some members of the community in, Clara. Let's show them what we're about, he urged boldly, turning back to Callum. If it's good enough, it will speak for itself. If it's not, well, that's part of the journey too. Clara's immediate excitement was infectious as she nodded enthusiastically. That's a brilliant idea. We can hold a tasting night. Let them give their authentic feedback. Real people, real reactions. Ethan felt a surge of energy. This was the breakthrough he needed. He had transformed this confrontation into a pivot point, a launch pad from which he could soar into new creative heights. Count me in, Callum said slowly, his demeanor shifting toward one of cordiality. But I'll be honest, if you really want to impress, you better raise the bar. Deal, Ethan replied, extending the unspoken challenge, feeling the once suffocating fears now morph into determination. This conversation illuminated a path forward, one he had nearly given up on. But as Clara and Ethan bounced ideas off each other, brainstorming how to build camaraderie through baking, a troubling thought echoed in the back of Ethan's mind. Though invigorated, he felt a persistent twist of uncertainty lingering nearby. Could he truly sustain this newfound confidence under the scrutiny of not just Callum, but the community as well? Just as hope sparked anew, a creeping doubt resurfaced. What if it wasn't enough? Would he crumble under the weight of expectations? As the workshop's atmosphere shifted to one of collaborative excitement, Ethan's excitement and doubt danced together, a complicated rhythm of anticipation. The stakes were higher than ever, and while he embraced the opportunity, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real test lay ahead. Just as Ethan opened his mouth to share another idea, a thought struck him. A realization that this triumph was as much a test of his will as it was a gateway to his growth. The moment was ripe with promise, yet he understood it wasn't just about the delectable pastries. It was about who he'd become through this journey of self-discovery. What challenges would emerge on this creative expedition? And would he find the strength to embrace the obstacles? Or would he succumb to the very doubts he aimed to conquer? Ethan stood at the edge of his ambitions, his heart still pounding from the fervor of the discussion. Clara's excitement filled the room, yet his own emotions felt weighted down by the uncertainty that shadowed him. The thought of inviting the community in was bold, but the fear of exposing himself, his insecurities and vulnerabilities, gnawed at him. "Do you think we can really handle this?" he finally asked Clara, his voice low. "What if it falls flat? What if they don't connect with what we're trying to convey?" Clara tilted her head, bringing her confidence close. "You said it yourself. This is about growth. The only way we can find out is to take the leap." Her unwavering belief in their project penetrated his doubt, igniting a flicker of conviction within him. Still, uncertainty lingered just beneath the surface. He busied himself with the logistics of the tasting night, meticulously planning each detail while fighting the voice in his head that whispered of inadequacy. He immersed himself in the details of the recipes they would showcase, experimenting relentlessly, trying to articulate their story through each unique flavor combination. The kitchen transformed into a whirlwind of activity, the air rich with the scents of baking bread and sweet confections. Each batch of pastries became a meditation on self-discipline and empowerment. This process, this tactile experience of creation, sharpened his focus and pushed him into a space of clarity. He was learning, evolving with every mistake tasted, and every victory savored. But as the days dwindled down to the night of the tasting, the butterflies in his stomach turned into an unsettled swarm of anxiety. Would the community embrace what he and Clara had created? Or would their offerings be met with indifference? He felt a pressing need to validate their hard work. Yet he was wrestling with the very essence of who he was, with the looming question of worthiness casting doubt on everything. The night arrived, and the room buzzed with anticipation. Yet underneath the surface, his tension erupted in a palpable fog of apprehension. Clara stepped into the spotlight, welcoming guests into their space, and that's when Ethan felt the first signs of panic stir. As people began to taste the pastries, he found himself retreating to the back, invisible as he watched from a distance. He could see their reactions, genuine delight as they savored the pastries. A laugh here, a nod of approval there, but a creeping thought settled over him. What if they were simply being polite? He yearned for authentic feedback, yet fear tethered him in place. Clara caught sight of him in the shadows. "Come out here, Ethan. They want to meet the creator." Her voice was buoyant, but it resonated with an urgency that snapped him into awareness. Stepping forward, he felt as if he were crossing an invisible line into his rediscovered reality. The faces before him blurred slightly, but he could see the warmth in their smiles. As they began to ask questions about his inspiration and the story behind each pastry, he felt a shift. Each query drew him deeper from the recesses of self-doubt and into the light of his artistic narrative. With every answer he gave, he felt the connection solidifying. He was weaving a bond between his truth and their understanding. The compliments began to cascade, lavished with enthusiasm, and suddenly he was acutely aware of the growth trajectory he was navigating. But lurking within the triumph was an understanding. These accolades were not merely an end, they were markers of the journey he had undertaken. As the crowd thinned, leaving behind a palpable sense of community, Ethan reflected on the impact of the night. Clara's laughter filled the air and surrounded him like a cocoon of warmth. Together, they had embarked on this path, working side by side to manifest their vision. But as he basked in the newfound affirmation, a critical realization struck him. Was this truly a definitive victory, or merely a stepping stone? There was still a road ahead, lush with possibilities yet fraught with challenges. The voice that once whispered insecurities transformed into a clearer question. How would he forge ahead after this validation? Ethan's newfound confidence was fragile, a house of cards perched on the brink of collapse. Despite the applause, the deeper fear snaked its way back into his thoughts, whispering that he had only scratched the surface of his potential. He could feel the weight of what lay ahead, and as Clara turned to him with a conspiratorial smile, Ethan understood that true growth would demand more than just creative expression. The night had been a catalyst, but it also raised a haunting dilemma within him. Would he continue to nourish this confidence, or succumb to the shadows of doubt he had barely shaken off? The next challenge loomed, and with it, the prospect of a deeper revelation about who he truly could become. As the initial thrill of the event subsided, Ethan found himself in a reflective haze, replaying the night's events in his mind. The laughter of guests, the flicker of surprise on their faces, the taste of his pastries, each memory was vivid, yet the encroaching doubt remained. Could he replicate this moment? Could he continue to grow, or was he destined to stumble with every subsequent attempt? The taste of success had ignited a flame, but he feared it was too easily extinguishable. Shifting from his earlier role as creator to that of a leader required a different skill set. How would he navigate this newfound territory? The applause echoed in his mind, but now It felt as though a cruel paradox had unfolded. Recognition was both exhilarating and paralyzing. With every compliment came an expectation. The burden of maintaining success weighed heavily on his shoulders. Determined to channel his uncertainty, Ethan began mapping out potential ideas for future offerings. Scattered sketches of pastries and concepts filled his notebook, revealing a kaleidoscope of visions that had begun to flourish in his mind. Yet underlying the excitement was a gnawing fear. Would they measure up? Would his creative instincts lead him astray? Clara noticed Ethan's distracted state during their follow-up discussions. "You seem lost in thought. What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice interwoven with patience and concern. "I'm just wondering what comes next," he replied, reluctance etching his features. "We had one good night, but that doesn't guarantee anything beyond it. What if I can't keep this up? What if you could?" Her question pierced through the fog of his self-doubt. Growth doesn't always come from success. Sometimes it's in the messiness of failure that we learn the most. Her words continued to resonate long after their conversation ended. With newfound clarity, Ethan began to recognize that vulnerability and courage were not mutually exclusive. If he wanted to evolve, he needed to embrace the learning curve. Every misstep was a step toward clarity. With that insight, he orchestrated a new plan. A themed series of tastings, each focusing on a different culinary technique or history. As he immersed himself in researching the culinary landscapes, Ethan felt the excitement building within. It was exhilarating to spread his wings, yet with it came whispers of inadequacy. He meticulously set his schedule, integrating time for research, testing, and feedback from Clara. But as he transitioned into this realm of experimentation, he quickly encountered obstacles. A recipe he had mastered turned out bland, flavors clashed instead of harmonizing, and yet another idea spiraled into a complicated mess. Self-judgment rushed in, threatening to drown out the flicker of inspiration. In those moments of stinging frustration, Clara's earlier remarks echoed in his mind. He reminded himself that respite lay in the lessons of failure. Rather than retreating into doubt, he drew forward into the uncomfortable familiarity of trial and error. Each setback ignited a discovery, a hidden talent revealed in the intricacies of flavor pairing, or an unexpected technique that enhanced the overall composition of a dish. Ethan began inviting a selected few friends to his kitchen, encouraging frank feedback. Recording their candid reactions transformed each session into a communal exploration of culinary expression. These gatherings were charged with unfiltered honesty, a canvas where vulnerability became resilience. As he grew more comfortable sharing his process, the noise of self-doubt began to fade. Feedback wasn't just criticism. It was a dialogue that strengthened his resolve. He learned that the connection he built with others through food transcended mere praise. It was a thorough exchange of ideas, but while nurturing the spirit of collaboration, a realization lingered. Every new dish required a piece of his essence, a slice of his vulnerabilities. The further he delved into his craft, the more exposed he felt. Was he truly ready to dive deeper, to challenge the complex interplay of his creative spirit? As the next tasting approached, he wrestled with the internal conflict of presenting something authentically personal while still inviting criticism. The fear of revealing too much gnawed at him, a nagging reminder of how far he still had to go. The stage was set for new risks, yet the question remained. Would he rise to face them? Or would he shrink back into the comfort of past successes? The very essence of growth was about to hinge on his willingness to venture into the unknown, and the clock ticked down to the moment that could irrevocably change everything. Ethan's heart raced as the day of the tasting drew closer. The scattered concepts in his notebook, each marked by ink smudges and half-finished ideas, had morphed into something more tangible, a collection of culinary narratives waiting to be unleashed. Yet alongside excitement flowed an undercurrent of anxiety, each new recipe a potential reflection of his inner turmoil. As he spent late nights perfecting flavors, each unsuccessful attempt felt like a thread unraveling from his carefully woven tapestry of confidence. One evening, as he whisked the batter for a rosewater-infused cake, a deep-seated question pulsed in his mind. Was he merely chasing the ephemeral thrill of recognition, or was he genuinely seeking to develop his craft? This internal dichotomy pushed against the walls of his resolve. Clara's voice surfaced amidst the chaos of thoughts. Each creation tells a story, she had said one day, gesturing to the flour-dusted countertop where remnants of experiments lay scattered. What do you want your next story to be? Ethan paused, allowing the question to penetrate through his self-doubt. He realized his past creations had been defined by their ability to impress rather than express. This time, he wanted something different. He wanted authenticity, a dish marked by his unique journey and the emotions that colored it. With this vision anchored in mind, he began sketching ideas that spoke to his personal experiences. He combined nostalgia with innovation, drawing from childhood memories of baking with his grandmother. The warm scents of cinnamon and vanilla, transformed into creations layered with unexpected contrasts, a nod to the complexities of his own growth. However, forging this new path came at a cost. By diving deeper into his reflections, he inevitably exposed the unrefined parts of himself. Each recipe became a mirror. Could he bear the reflection staring back? In moments of quiet self-critique, the whisper of inadequacy resurfaced, threatening to consume his resolve. What if they were not well received? What if his vulnerability fell flat? To combat this internal sabotage, Ethan reached out to culinary mentors, those whose expertise illuminated paths he hadn't considered. He observed them not only in the kitchen, but also in their approaches to creative risks. With each discussion, Ethan soaked in their wisdom, how they viewed failure as a pathway to innovation rather than an ending. There was a palpable shift. With mentorship came support, and alongside that support blossomed a sense of belonging he had long sought. The fear of judgment now mingled with a promise of communion among peers. He began to see that his journey was not one of solitary introspection, but rather a shared exploration. The day before the tasting arrived, Ethan meticulously arranged his kitchen, ensuring every ingredient felt purposeful as it spilled into the dishes waiting to be served. Yet as he stepped back and surveyed the array of creations, a familiar wave of doubt surged through him. Were they a true reflection of his growth, or mere attempts to impress? In that moment, he placed his hands on the counters, grounding himself in the now. His thoughts drifted back to Clara's words. It's in the messiness of failure that we learn the most. Perhaps the answer lay not in seeking perfection, but in embracing imperfection fully. With renewed determination, Ethan took a deep breath. The timing was crucial, and he felt he stood at a crossroads. Would he break through the confines of doubt and share his journey with authenticity? Or would he cling to the safer shadows, hoping to shield himself from potential disappointment? As the first guests began to arrive, anticipation thrummed in the air. Ethan stood at the threshold of revelation, the atmosphere thick with both opportunity and trepidation. Now, as the door swung open and the first footsteps echoed into his kitchen, he had to confront the question that loomed large. Was he brave enough to serve not just food, but fragments of his very self, knowing that in sharing his vulnerabilities, he could finally face the truth of his own evolution? Ethan stood at the threshold of the bakery, heart racing, absorbing the vibrant buzz of chatter resonating in the air. The room pulsed with palpable energy, a stark contrast to the silence that had once enveloped his life after his mother's passing. As he joined the guests mingling amongst the delicate pastries, a profound shift echoed deep within him. This occasion was not merely about serving delicious baked goods. It was a celebration of transformation, an unveiling of his journey from grief to growth. The faces in front of him revealed palpable excitement, mixed with inquisitive anticipation. As they sampled the creations he had poured his soul into, he experienced an unexpected wave of validation, washing away the lingering shadows of self-doubt. Each smile in response to his baked offerings felt like an affirmation of his journey, a revelation that his art flourished not just in the creation, but in the authenticity he dared to embrace. "Ethan, this lemon tart is incredible!" A voice cut through the air, jolting him from his reflections. He turned to find a neighbor, a woman who had once called him the widow's son, taking a second bite of the fragrant citrus confection. The moment carried an unexpected weight, the shift in perception blooming affirmatively as she continued. "I never knew you had this talent. It's so vibrant and full of life." Ethan felt a swell of pride rising within him, solidifying a newfound confidence that anchored his earlier trepidation. The vulnerabilities he had once shied away from had transformed into bridges connecting him to others, their palpable excitement resonating with his revival. With every compliment he received, It felt as if his past was shedding beneath the layers of acknowledgement and acceptance. Clara's laughter reached him from a nearby table, her voice like a bright beacon illuminating his path amidst uncertainties. He caught a glimpse of her animated discussions, engaging guests with stories behind each pastry and artisanal loaf they had crafted together. The fluid exchange of ideas and shared enthusiasm mirrored the growth he experienced. She was already lighting up the world around her in ways he could barely dream of before embarking on this journey. His heart tightened at the thought that sharing this endeavor had anchored him into a broader narrative, one that transcended solitary grief. "Ethan!" Clara waved him over, her eyes twinkling with encouragement. "You need to tell them about the cinnamon rolls." This moment pressed against him as if calling forth the bravery he had nested deep within himself. The rolling fear of exposure that had shadowed him wasn't tight around his chest anymore. It had morphed into an invitation to share his story. With a resolute nod, he stepped forward, reveling in the energy surging from a sense of belonging more profound than ever. "You know," Ethan began, his voice steady against the gentle hum of the room, "these cinnamon rolls are inspired by my childhood. The afternoons spent eagerly waiting by the oven as my grandmother baked. Every swirl of flavor carries pieces of those beautiful moments, reminding me that it's not just about what we create, but the love infused into every bite." He felt the swell of empowerment as he spoke, each word solidifying his place amidst the community he had once felt disconnected from. Their attentiveness solidified the sense of connection he had long yearned for. Vulnerability, once a source of fear, became the foundation for authenticity. Cheers erupted around him as the guests embraced his story and eagerly reached for another cinnamon roll. The sound of their voices mingling filled him with an earnest sensation. This was not merely a day of tasting, but a defining moment where personal growth was mirrored across faces that had once looked away in pity. As the evening wound down, the applause for Ethan's journey became music to his ears, replacing the sharp sting of judgment that had echoed in days past. Neither the flashiness of accolades, nor the ghosts of his earlier insecurity, could undermine the strength he had cultivated through his exploration of self. In the hours spent sharing pastries and stories, he had woven a rich tapestry of connection, not just for himself, but for every person present. The energy radiating from their joy mirrored the fulfillment blossoming within him. He had dared to embrace his story and found acceptance in its honesty. Ethan left that evening as someone transformed, the widow's son, now wearing a badge sculpted by resilience and realization. Where there had once been despair, now solid confidence stood resolute. As the last of the guests departed, he exchanged knowing glances with Clara that actively acknowledged the leap they had taken together. "Next time, let's explore international flavors," she suggested, her smile contagious. "The world is wide, and we are just scratching the surface," he agreed, feeling the weight of tomorrow spark readiness. Ethan dared to envision where this new chapter would lead, not just for his culinary passions, but toward continually embracing his own identity. He had conquered fears and silenced the whispers of inadequacy that once ruled his thoughts. He had become someone worthy of recognition, one who could foster creative connections through vulnerability. As the door closed behind the last departing guest, Ethan took a moment to soak it all in. The possibilities erupted around him like a fireworks show, illuminating a pathway paved with dreams unfurling into reality. He was alive, and more importantly, he was crafting a life that resonated with joy, connection, and unfeigned love. This wasn't just a triumph. It was the beginning of a transformative journey, a statement that he had arrived. He had achieved something remarkable, not only in flavors and techniques, but more deeply, in constructing a life filled with intention. With a wide smile, he turned back toward Clara and his awaiting kitchen. The work ahead was his alone to mold, and with both hands firmly grasped around his new reality, he was ready to shape it into something undeniably beautiful. Now, it's your turn to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. We want to hear from you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.